In this video, I just want to go over budget, bankroll and bidding. So this can really make or break your success with native ads, because if you get this wrong and you mess this up, you could run out of money before you finish the testing phase. So you really need to give this some thought before you even start running your campaign. So as I mentioned in the previous video, there's lots of variables when we're running our native ads campaign. There's obviously all of the elements inside the funnel that we're testing at once, but then there's also all of the placements and all of the widgets that we're also going to be testing at the same time as well. And what you need to realize is the more variables that you're testing at once, the more expensive the testing phase is. So what you don't want to do is test too many things at once and then run out of budget and not have enough bankroll before you've even finished the testing phase. And it also plays into bidding as well. You don't want to be bidding too high too early on and then not being able to keep that up later on down the line because you're actually running out of money. So I just want to touch on this video. I'm going to go into more detail about bidding later on when I'm actually setting up the campaign, but I just want to give you an idea of if you've got a certain amount of budget, how you need to tackle this. Because if someone's got if you've got $1,000 to spend and you want to try and make that profitable with native ads, it's going to be more difficult than someone that's got a $30,000 budget. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but there's just a different way that you need to go about it. So that's what I'm going to cover in this video. So there's a rule that you should really follow when we're running native ads, and it's basically every placement that we're running our adverts on, in order to know whether that's profitable for our offer, we need to be prepared to spend 1 times the offer payout per placement. So every single widget on every single website, we will never know if that's profitable until we've spent the amount of our payout. Hopefully that makes sense. So say for instance, if we are getting paid out $80 for promoting a product, if we're putting this on a CNN website and it's on a widget at the bottom, we need to spend at least $80 and see whether we get any conversions before we turn that off, before we know if it's profitable. If we spend $40 on it and then turn it off, we never would have known if that's going to be profitable, because it could actually get a conversion after we spend $50, but we wouldn't know that. So the good rule of thumb is that we spend 1 times the offer payout per placement. Now this varies depending on your budget, because if you're on a lower budget, then you can do this a bit more conservatively, and you can spend 0.8, so 80% of the offer payout per placement. Now this means that you might miss some placements that might become profitable a little bit later on, but it's a good way of conserving your cash if you are on a lower budget. And the same thing goes if you've got more of a budget and you kind of want to test a bit more aggressively, then you might want to spend a little bit more per placement, because sometimes that placement might be having an off day, and or maybe the traffic just didn't arrive that day, the right person, and it could convert a little bit later on. So you might, if you've got more of a budget, want to spend a little bit more per placement before you actually turn that off and blacklist it altogether. But a good rule of thumb is just going for one times the offer payout per placement. And I'll just explain a little example here. So say for instance the offer is $80 that we're getting paid for every conversion that we generate, and we're going to run our campaign on, say, Rev Content, and we've decided to run it on 100 placements, and I'm going to talk you through in the next video about how we can target specific placements. But if we're going to run it on 100 placements, the budget to test that is, if we're going to be spending 1 times the offer payout per placement, that's going to be $8,000 that we need to be spending to test that offer. Now in an ideal situation, obviously not all of them placements will convert, but in an ideal situation we're going to be making that money back, or a large chunk of that money back in conversions, if the offer that we've chosen is a high converter and it's converting. So we're not going to be spending $8,000 and then we're not getting it back. We will be getting some sales from that, but it might not necessarily be profitable at that stage. We might say only make $3,000 back or $4,000 back or whatever it is. So this is what you need to realize: it's a testing budget, and then from that testing phase we might find out that, well, actually 20 of those placements, 20 of those websites were really profitable, the rest weren't, and then we can get rid of those and we spend the rest of the budget, the $3,000, the $4,000 that we got back on those placements, and then that's when we actually start building up the profit. Now obviously I'm going to go into more detail about that later on with whitelisting and blacklisting, But that's kind of the process of what you need to realize when you're budgeting, because if you end up running your campaign on just run of network on all placements available, which is what most people do when they start native ads, you might be running your campaign on 10,000 or more individual widgets. And to give that a fair testing phase, you'd have to spend $80 times 10,000, which is impossible. No one's got that money to test. No one wants to risk that money testing. So it's best to kind of test on a smaller scale, which I'll show you how we do that later on. But I just want to add as well, obviously, if you're on a lower budget, then you would go a little bit lower. So say, for instance, we was to test this on an 80% of $80, which I think I worked out before, so like $64. We'd spend $64 times the 100 placements, which would be 6,400. So that's how you can see you can still test with a smaller budget, and you could still get some results from that. Another thing to note is that obviously if you've got an even smaller budget from that, it might be a case where you want to actually go even lower, so actually test it on 50 placements. Hopefully that makes sense.